Hi guys, welcome to SMYLZ.com. I, of course, am the Legendary SMYLZ. But anyway, I saw this video by Laci Green, and this video was called She Asked For It. The premise of the video is Laci Green was trying to suggest that victims of crimes, sex crimes specifically, are completely blameless and faultless of having these crimes acted upon against them. It is completely the fault of the perpetrator for doing whatever that crime is. Whether it was hacking into a person's computer and stealing all of their naughty pics, or being touched inappropriately at a party, or being raped, the victim of these sex crimes, if all they were doing was following the letter of the law and exercising their freedoms, they are not to blame for anything. It is completely the blame of the person who performed the crime, the hacker, the assaulter, the rapist, or whatever. It's 100% their fault, their sole responsibility, and not the fault of the victim at all. The victim is completely blameless if they did nothing wrong. There's nothing that the victim did to have that happen to them or to bring it upon themselves. She even goes on to suggest that if the victim is recollecting these events to an authority figure or a friend, if the friend or the authority figure asks certain questions like, well, what were you wearing, or how much did you have to drink, or did you secure with a password, that even asking these questions is absurd and is partially blaming the victim, saying that they are at fault at being the victim of a crime, that there were certain things that they had done to have this crime happen to them. I get that the idea is to spare feelings. The idea of this video is to help victims lose their guilt. The idea is to make them feel blameless, because maybe the victims of these crimes, although it may be horrible that it happened to them, some of them may feel like they're at fault, that they did something wrong, and they are guilty of it. And in the fantasy world, in the delusional world, that's true. In the fantasy world and delusional world, if all you were doing was nothing and following the letter of the law, you should be able to dress how you want, drink as much as you want, dance however you want, go wherever you want at any time, and nothing should happen to you. But we don't live in that fantasy world. We live in a real world. And in the real world, there are certain scenarios where the victim of crimes, sex crimes or whatever, put themselves at a certain risk and are partially to blame or at fault for having a crime happen to them. Yes, even if what you're doing is legal and there's nothing wrong with it and you're just exercising your freedoms and your rights, there's always a risk involved in whatever you do, even if there's nothing wrong. For instance, let's say I walk across the street, and as I'm walking across the street, I get hit by a car. Right? And the EMTs come. When the EMTs come to get me and put me in the ambulance, one of them might ask me, well, before you crossed the street, did you look both ways? Now, you might ask yourself, well, wait, by the letter of the law, all drivers must yield to pedestrians. Crossing the street is a right that I'm entitled to. I have the right to walk across the street. I'm entitled to walk across the street. I can do that. There's nothing wrong with that. But although I didn't look both ways, I put myself at risk. Just walking across the street is a risk within itself, even though it's something I'm able to do, even though there's nothing illegal or wrong, and it may be even necessary to walk across the street. That's putting myself at risk in general. But by not looking both ways before crossing the street, I just made that risk greater of getting hit by a car. Although it's by law the fault of the driver, if I didn't look both ways, I put myself at a greater risk. So if I get hit by a driver, by not looking both ways, but not assessing the situation, I made the risk greater upon myself. I am partially at fault for making myself the victim of getting hit by a car, by not taking certain logical precautions. So yes, Not looking both ways is not illegal. Walking across the street is not illegal. It's just rights and freedoms. But by not looking both ways, I made the risk of getting hit by a car greater. There are certain things people do to put themselves at greater risk because they did not take proper precautions, even in sex crimes. Sometimes women who are raped or people who are raped make the risk of them being raped greater by putting themselves in certain scenarios and not taking the proper precautions. Even though what they may be doing, even though no matter what, they should be able to wear what they want to wear, drink as much as they want to drink, dance how they want to dance, and going to places maybe, they feel like they should be because they just want to enjoy life and enjoy freedoms of life. But that all comes with a risk in the real world. Scenario. It is completely legal in my right to walk on a sidewalk. It's a public thoroughfare. I can walk on the sidewalk anytime I feel like it, no matter what time it is. I can walk on the sidewalk in any neighborhood because it's my right. I can completely do that, right? I can walk on the sidewalk of a poverty-stricken neighborhood. It's my right to do so. But just by walking on the sidewalk of a poverty-stricken neighborhood, I put myself at risk for being mugged. In the utopian world, I should be able to just walk down the street in a poverty-stricken neighborhood and not be mugged because walking down the street in a poverty-stricken neighborhood is not illegal. It's a right that I can exercise. I can walk down the street on the sidewalk in a poverty-stricken neighborhood. There's nothing I'm doing wrong. So if I get mugged in a utopian world, nothing I'm doing is my fault, right? So, excuse me, I had the sniffles. So if I'm walking down the street in this poverty-stricken neighborhood, I also should be able to wear what I want to wear. And let's say I want to wear the most expensive name brand clothing I can find. I have a right to do that. In a utopian world, I should be able to wear what I want to wear while walking down the sidewalk in a poverty-stricken neighborhood and not be mugged. But in the real world, by wearing expensive clothing in a poverty-stricken neighborhood while walking down the sidewalk, I've just increased the risk. I just increased the risk of being a target for a mugging. So let's say I'm walking down this poverty-stricken neighborhood wearing this expensive clothing, but I also want to accessorize, so I'll wear expensive jewelry. I have earrings on, I have a medallion and chain, and I have watches and bracelets and rings. None of that is illegal. I have the right to do that. I'm doing nothing wrong. In a utopian world, I should be able to wear jewelry over expensive clothing while walking down the sidewalk in a poverty-stricken neighborhood and not be mugged. But in the real world, by adding jewelry on top of an expensive outfit while walking down the sidewalk in a poverty-stricken neighborhood, I just further increase the risk of being a target for a mugging. Let's say while I'm walking down the street in this poverty-stricken neighborhood with the expensive clothing and the expensive jewelry, I forget how much money I have on me. Oh, damn, how much money do I have on me? So what I do is I pull my money out and I decide to count it while walking down the street in this poverty-stricken neighborhood with jewelry on and expensive clothing on. In a utopian world, it's my money. I should be able to count it anytime I feel like it. In a utopian, beautiful, delusional, fantastic world, I should be able to pull out my money in the middle of a poverty-stricken neighborhood while walking down the sidewalk with expensive jewelry and expensive clothing and count the money and nothing happened to me. Because nothing I'm doing is wrong or illegal. I'm at no fault at doing anything. But in the logical real world, by holding money in my hand and counting it with expensive jewelry and expensive clothing on while walking down the street in a poverty-stricken neighborhood, I just further increased the risk of being mugged. I'm becoming more and more of a target. The more of these freedoms that I'm exercising is drawing more attention to myself. I'm furthering the risk. I am responsible for furthering the risk. Let's say while I'm counting the money, I have a song in my head. It's not illegal to sing out loud at a certain volume. It's not disturbing the peace. So while I'm counting my money, while walking down the street in this poverty-stricken neighborhood wearing expensive clothing and expensive jewelry, I'm singing aloud. I'm in the money. I have a right to do that. Nothing about that is illegal. I'm just exercising my freedoms. I have the freedom to walk down the street in a poverty-stricken neighborhood wearing expensive clothing, expensive jewelry, while counting money and saying I'm in the money in a neighborhood that I'm unfamiliar with a bunch of people watching me. Listen to me saying that I'm in the money. And I should be able to do that without fear of being mugged because I'm doing nothing wrong. But in the real world, I made myself a target. In the real world, if I get mugged, although I didn't do anything wrong, I am partially responsible because I didn't take certain common sense precautions. So if I get mugged, and while filing the police report, the cops ask, well, what were you wearing? Or how expensive was your jewelry? It's like saying, well, whoa, why does that matter? I got mugged. Yeah, sure, I was walking in a poverty-stricken neighborhood in front of everybody saying I have all kinds of money and wearing all these expensive jewelry and clothes that just got stolen from me, but none of that is my fault. I'm completely blameless. I'm completely faultless. I have the right to count my money in front of poverty-stricken people in a poverty-stricken neighborhood wearing whatever I want to wear. There's no fault of my own. You should be going out to try to find the mugger and figure out why that guy mugged me because it's 100% their fault. I did nothing wrong. I'm completely blameless. I would love to be able to say that. But in the real world, the cop would tell me, you know what? Maybe, just maybe you shouldn't wear these clothes in this neighborhood. Maybe you shouldn't wear these jewelries and these accessories in this neighborhood. Maybe you shouldn't count your money in front of people in a poverty-stricken neighborhood. They're not blaming me. They're not making me feel shame. They're just telling me certain precautions, right? So in a scenario where a victim of a sex crime and they're asking them questions like, what did you wear or how much did you have to drink? They're not asking to shame the victim. They're not asking to blame the victim. They're asking so it doesn't happen next time. That's the responsible thing to do. If a woman is raped after going to a frat party, it may be wise to ask, well, how much did you have to drink? Maybe next time you go to a frat party, you don't drink as much. We're not asking you to say, hey, it's your fault and maybe you shouldn't have drunk this much or you're to blame or you brought it upon yourself. What we're saying is, let's think about how much risk you put on yourself. Maybe next time you shouldn't drink this much. Maybe next time you shouldn't even go to this party. Maybe next time you should dress a little bit differently. We're not saying you did anything wrong. We're not trying to blame you for it. We're saying maybe you have done some things that made yourself a target. That's the reality of it. That's the reality of it. So, as much as you want to absolve the guilt of victims of sex crimes, there may be certain things that the victim have done to make them a greater risk. Maybe they didn't look both ways before crossing the street, before going to whatever situation that put them in a position to be raped or have a sex crime happen to them. You know? Certain common sense precautions. In a utopian world, a woman should be able to go to a frat party with predominantly heterosexual males, wearing whatever she wants to wear, whether it exposes her cleavage and her thighs, and she should be able to dance and gyrate sexually to sexually stimulating songs and nothing happened to her. But the more flesh she exposed at this frat party, the more she drinks at this frat party, the more sexy she dances and gyrates to music at this frat party, she is putting herself at greater risk. Although she is doing nothing wrong, although she is doing nothing illegal, although she's exercising her freedoms, she is also putting herself at greater and greater and greater risk. So if she does get drunk and super shit-faced, we can't guarantee her safety. Why? Human nature. It's a sad part of human nature, but you can't correct human nature. So if something happens to this girl because she overly got drunk and danced sexually at this frat party wearing next to nothing, maybe, just maybe, she asked for it.